But before we present the cantata, I will explain who John Brown was, explore each movement of the cantata, and from a textual and musical standpoint, and conclude with some thoughts on John Brown's legacy. So who's John Brown? Well, he was a radical abolitionist, most famous for planning and leading a raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia, in hopes of fomenting an armed uprising of slaves to overthrow slavery in the United States. How he went from being a many times failed businessman to the martyr of Harper's Ferry and a near mythical figure in his own time is a very remarkable story. John Brown was born May 9th, 1800 in Torrington, Connecticut, in a plain farmhouse. He was descended from some of the first settlers in New England and the grandson of a Revolutionary War soldier. Nevertheless, he was born into economic precarity. His father, Owen, a tanner by trade, moved his family west in 1805 in search of land and opportunity. Owen raised his family in the religious tradition of his Puritan ancestors, instilling the fear of God into his children in the best Calvinist tradition. He also taught them that slavery was a great sin. At the time, slavery was surging across the South after the invention of the cotton gin and the great expansion of cotton agriculture. At an early age, he witnessed firsthand the horrors of slavery. At age 12, during the War of 1812, John was entrusted to herd cattle at the age of 12, to over 100 miles to an outpost in Michigan. One night on that drive, he stayed with a landlord who owned a slave boy around John's own age, who made a very favorable impression on him. Later that night, John witnessed the owner beat him with an iron shovel while he could do nothing but watch. In a letter years later, he recounted this story to a friend, saying that it turned him into a most determined abolitionist, committing to fighting an eternal war against slavery. John Brown became a tanner like his father, and in 1820 married Dianthe Lusk, with whom he would have 6 children. He moved his family to Pennsylvania, where Dianthe died in childbirth, and went on the next year to marry Mary Ann Day, with whom he would have 13 children. Very large number. By all accounts, he raised his children with strict, severe discipline, a Bible in one hand and a rod in the other. But he was also very caring, and his children always spoke very well of him. While John was starting his large family in the 1820s and 30s, the abolitionist movement was gaining momentum. Publications like David Walker's 1829 Appeal in 4 Articles called for the immediate violent overthrow of the slave system, followed in 1831 by William Lloyd Garrison's newspaper, The Liberator, calling slavery a national sin and advocating for immediate emancipation. Later that year, 1831, Nat Turner's rebellion rocked the country, contributing to the fervor around the slavery debate. It was Garrison's Liberator that John Brown first read while on a visit to his father in 1833. John got himself a subscription and became further engaged in the abolitionist movement. He frequently had schemes he couldn't finance, such as opening a schoolhouse for black children. He long wanted to do this. He went bankrupt, I think, for the first time in 1835 and moved back to Ohio. After the murder of abolitionist newspaper editor Elijah Lovejoy in Alton, Illinois in 1837, John stood up before a prayer meeting and pledged to devote the rest of his life to abolishing the sin of slavery. The ensuing years saw him bound between one failed business venture after another, eventually settling in northern New York State, the Adirondack Mountains near Lake Placid, as part of a plan to help settle free black families on homesteads. He considered this property at North Elba to be home for the rest of his life. It was in Kansas, however, that John moved from rhetoric and vague plans into action for the cause of emancipation. The United States was advancing westward, which is our polite way of saying spreading settler colonial violence all over the continent. But it is what it is. There had been long-standing tensions about whether the newly admitted states would be slave or free. Following the 1846 to 1848 war with Mexico, the Compromise of 1850 admitted California as a free state, Texas as a slave state, and expanded the Fugitive Slave Act. Of course, that didn't settle anything, as Southern politicians pushed for slavery to be allowed in the lands of Louisiana Purchase, north of the 3630 parallel, which is that southern border of Kansas territory. So what was marked there is Kansas and Nebraska were unorganized territories from the Louisiana Purchase that land north of that parallel had been, in the Compromise of 1821, forbidden to have slavery. They wanted to revisit that with the Kansas, when Senator Stephen A. Douglas introduced the Kansas-Nebraska Act to organize the lands of the Louisiana Purchase to facilitate building the transcontinental railroad. He proposed splitting that territory to Kansas Territory and Nebraska Territory. The question of whether slavery would be allowed in Kansas Territory was to be left to a vote of the settlers. So this opened a flood of settlement from people on both sides of the debate. Among the abolitionists flocking to Kansas Territory in 1854 were John Brown's sons, at least some of them. John Brown Jr., Jason, Owen, Frederick, and Sam. John Brown Sr. initially declined to join them, but the next year went to Kansas after a letter from his son John Jr., imploring him for help with procuring weapons to fight pro-slavery settlers and border ruffians. They noticed on their trip over that everyone around them, all the Missouri settlers, were armed to the teeth while they had only agricultural implements with them and like 2 squirrel rifles and a pistol. That's all they had. So John arrived in October 1855. Shortly after his arrival, word spread of the murder of a free soiler, as the anti-slavery settlers were known, by a pro-slavery Virginian settler in the town of Brown Station. Free soilers rallied in nearby Lawrence, an anti-slavery stronghold. John Brown and his family went to Lawrence, armed and ready to fight. He was dubbed a captain of the 1st Brigade of Kansas Volunteers and was given command of a small company called the Liberty Guards, which consisted largely of his own sons. There was no fighting that night, and not much until the following spring. In May of 1856, pro-slavery border ruffians sacked the town of Lawrence, destroying the Free State Hotel and destroying the abolitionist paper's printing presses. In retaliation, Brown's men raided the nearby pro-slavery settlement of Pottawatomie Creek, killing 5 men. The raid was widely reported in newspapers all over the country. From that incident, Brown was a marked man, a bounty on his head, and federal troops, vigilantes, and border ruffians all trying to track him down. 2 more incidents grew his fame in Kansas. The Battle of Blackjack in 1856, where despite being outnumbered 2-1, Brown and his men prevailed and captured the man who was there to arrest him. And Osawatomie in August, where Brown and his men held off a larger force of border ruffians, only to be routed and flee while the pro-slavery forces burned the town. It was at Osawatomie that his son Frederick was killed. Violence in Kansas escalated after that point, calming in September when 1,300 federal troops arrived. Brown escaped back to the Northeast in October. Prior to his Kansas expedition, John Brown had spent some years traveling around the Northeast in an ultimately failed bull trading venture. The Du Bois biography of him has a really great accounting of all of the details of that, if you're interested. And he spent a lot of time in Boston. While in Boston, he became active in the abolitionist movement there, speaking at meetings and talking to the prominent people of the movement. He had long had a plan for a subterranean passway, his expansion of the Underground Railroad, that would rely on the rugged terrain of the Appalachian Mountains, in which he had spent much of his life during his various employments. He believed a small force of well-trained men could hold off much larger forces in that mountainous land and could augment their forces by raiding nearby plantations, adding those able to fight to their forces and sending the rest north. In this fashion, he envisioned gradually emancipating enough enslaved people to force the nation into action to end slavery. It was this plan that he had in mind when he returned to the Northeast in 1856. He spent much of 1857 raising money, including from a group of prominent Boston abolitionists called the Secret Six. He traveled back to Kansas in November 1857, recruiting fighters for his cause. This new force traveled back east. leading the force traveled back east via Tabor, Iowa, where John had stockpiled rifles, ammunition, and 1,000 pikes. In Rochester, New York, Brown visited the famous freed slave Frederick Douglass, trying to win his support for the plan. With his help, he went so far as to draft a constitution for the free state that he planned to build in the mountains. Gathering support for it first among his men, and then among the freed people who escaped to Chatham, Ontario. It was ratified in a meeting there. It was in Chatham that he first publicly announced this whole plan. He led his force back to Kansas, freeing 11 slaves from Missouri and getting them to Canada. He spent the spring of 1859 bidding farewell to his family in North Eldon, New York. That summer, he moved his forces to a rented farm near Harper's Ferry, Virginia. It was there he revealed to his men that the first step of his plan was to seize the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry. He had to convince his men using his by then legendary powers of persuasion. He tried one last time to convince Frederick Douglass to join the fight with him, but Douglass didn't. However, there was a young free man that Douglass was traveling with that did join. Brown's been on October 16th, 1859, leaving 2 men to guard the farm, John Brown led his men on their night raid into Harper's Ferry. They crossed the Potomac River Bridge, captured the night watchman, cut the telegraph wires, and proceeded to take the armory, the arsenal, the bridge over the Shenandoah, and the rifle factory. A small detachment went to a nearby plantation to capture the slaveholders and rally the slaves to their cause. The early hours of the raid were successful. This was not to last. The relief watchman arrived to take his post at the Potomac Bridge, found it unguarded, and quickly ran to sound the alarm. A hotel employee warned the conductor of an eastbound train about the seizure of the bridge. John Brown himself spoke with the conductor and ultimately, unfortunately for the raid, allowed the train to proceed. As soon as the train was at its next stop, they telegraphed a warning about the raid. It was inaccurate. They said that 150 raiders held the town with the help of local slaves who had been armed. In reality, Brown's band numbered only 22, and help never arrived. Church bells rang on the morning of October 17th, calling militiamen to assemble and retake the town. By noon, 2 companies had arrived, and gunfire ensued from 1 o'clock. The militia surrounded one building after another, killing or capturing the raiders. That night, a unit of Marines arrived under the command of Colonel Robert E. Lee. The next morning, his aide, Lieutenant J.E.B. Stewart, passed Brown a note from Lee demanding his immediate and unconditional surrender. When Brown refused, the Marines stormed the building, killing or capturing all the remaining raiders. Of the 22 men involved, 10 were killed or mortally wounded, 7 were captured, and only 5 escaped. Some historians have noted that it was likely Brown's eloquence at trial that was more dangerous to slavery than his raid on Harper's Ferry. Every word was widely reported by journalists at the time. From a letter to his wife, it was clear that he was determined to die a martyr. He shouted down a lawyer hired by the Secret Six who wanted to file an insanity defense in an attempt to spare his life. Many of Brown's detractors at the time tried to paint him as a madman, but no one close to him believed him insane. Obsessed, yes, but not insane. After a 4-day trial and only 45 minutes deliberation, Brown was found guilty of treason, murder, and inciting slave rebellion. At the sentencing, the judge allowed Brown to speak, and one biographer called the ensuing 5 minutes the most stirring words ever to come from an American courtroom. I have a quotation from it here. If it is deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life for the furtherance of the ends of justice, and mingle my blood with the blood of millions in this slave country whose rights are disregarded by wicked, cruel, and unjust enactments, I say let it be done. Brown spent the last month of his life in jail, writing a large volume of letters to family and friends. Many were published in newspapers at the time and have been gathered in books since. On December 2nd, a month after sentencing, John Brown rode atop his own coffin to the gallows, where a crowd watched. Among that crowd were several people who become notable in the coming years. There was Professor Thomas Jackson of the Virginia Military Institute, known to history as General Stonewall Jackson. Edmund Ruffin, who had fired the first shot at Fort Sumter that would start the Civil War. and John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated Abraham Lincoln. Brown was hanged, and 6 days later was buried at his farm in North Elton, New York. After Brown's death, he became a symbol for both North and South. Fire-eating Southerners, as secessionists were known, took Brown for a sign that abolitionists would stop at nothing to destroy their property and way of life. Conservative Northerners distanced themselves from Brown's tactics and vigilantism, arguing that it hurt the cause of liberty. But Northern abolitionists carried the message of John Brown the martyr, with luminaries such as Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau calling him a hero, an idealist, and above all, a person to emulate and admire. As historian Jonathan Earl noted, it was only fitting that thousands marched into battle singing about John Brown's body. So, who are we? Why this project? I wanted to situate this work with the artist creating it. I first met Dorian several years ago while working with Sing in Solidarity, a community chorus that I had the honor of helping to found in 2018, 2017? 2018. As most of you know, I'm an operatic baritone with a long-standing interest in politics and social justice. I went so far as to complete a double major in political science while an undergraduate at Rutgers, though at the time it was more in case the whole voice performance thing didn't work out and I went to law school. My politics grew more radical as I aged, though there were early signs. Still, music and political activism remained separate in my life until a Facebook post in the Democratic Socialists of America new members page caught my eye. Someone calling for musicians of any level of experience to start a socialist choir in New York. The first meeting of what would become Sing in Solidarity actually happened in this building right across the hall. On the day I found out I was admitted to this PhD program, I had the privilege of conducting their first major rehearsal, teaching Solidarity Forever in 4-part harmony in Pearl Studios on 8th Avenue. Since then, I learned more and more about the intersections of music and radical politics and the place of music in social movements. I have long sought a way to make a contribution to that world. Now I'd like to have Dorian introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dorian Wallace, he, him. I am a musician, composer, pianist, and board-certified music therapist. Throughout my life, I've expressed myself through improvisation and composition, guided by a continual exploration of diverse musical traditions, aesthetics, and worldviews. My clinical work as a music therapist has included prisons and detention centers, including Rikers Island, Crossroads Juvenile Detention Center, and Sing Sing Prison, as well as a cult recovery music therapy support group with the Lolledge Center for Cults and Coercive Control, and hospice and palliative care, which is end-of-life care at Calvary Hospital, which is right across the river. So while many of my experiences have shaped my political development, a defining point was the August 9th, 2014 murder of 18-year-old unarmed black teenager Michael Brown by the fascist police officer Dorian Wilson. I didn't write this down, but I was in the military at the time. I was in the Army. And to me, it was a clear-cut murder. Like, I was still not politically developed, but it was a clear-cut crime. And I was shocked at just how many people in my personal circle were taking the side of the police. It was very shocking, because it was like, y'all, my 5-year-old daughter's here. Like, y'all, come on. So anyways, this event shattered the political worldview I had long inhabited and compelled me to radically re-examine the world and my worldview and my position within it. Since then, I have oriented my music toward community engagement, social messaging, and liberatory politics. I joined Sing in Solidarity to offer my piano skills and musical knowledge in service of socialist, abolitionist labor, and decolonial movements. and I returned to school to become a music therapist. Many of us in Sing in Solidarity who are considered professional musicians, we often reflect that making music alongside community members has actually become one of the most meaningful experiences of our political lives. You learn a lot when you sing people's songs. Holy crap. But yeah, this piece is my tribute to the vernacular music traditions that I've come to learn through that work. And just one final comment. The other thing on just the content of it, this is about John Brown, and I'm a white man. Nick is a white man. There are not many of us in our history that I really want to revisit in a positive light. And John Brown is one of them. Malcolm X famously said, when asked, are there any white people that you're okay with? He was like, John Brown. Paraphrasing it, but so I just didn't feel the same amount of shame and criticism that that so many people of my demographic have caused so much pain to so many other communities. And this is one of the this is one of the few individuals in at least contemporary American history who was actually on the right side of history. So yeah, thank you.
So, let's get into the piece. First movement is called Old Brown Canvas. All of the movement titles are monikers of one sort or another for John Brown. The first movement of this piece is drawn from Psalm 94, the King James Version that would have been familiar to John Brown. He considered his work to emancipate slaves to stem from his Christian belief, and he believed that God was using him as an instrument to drive out the sin of slavery. Dorian selected this text after looking for scriptural passages that spoke of God's vengeance. The full text of Psalm 94 is 23 verses. Dorian selected 7. Actually, 8. Okay, cool. We discussed it as 7, and then I counted again. But either way, it's a number of significance in the Lucas series or the Fibonacci series. Both, he's explained that he frequently finds groups that correspond to one of those two number series to just make the most sense aesthetically. So the Fibonacci series, of course, 0, 1, where the numbers are, the following number is the sum of the preceding two numbers. Just the Lucas series starts on 2, but otherwise it's yeah. The first movement of this piece, which is 5 movements, is a Fibonacci number, is set mostly in the manner of a hymn, as would have been sung in churches from Brown's time until now. It's true the first and third sections of the piece. The second section takes a slightly different approach. Of first significance is the key of this movement, B flat. Dorian explained this as a grounding key, which he frequently employs in his music therapy work. B flat is close to the resonant hum produced by electrical devices. That hum is usually around 60 hertz. B flat 1 is about 58 hertz. In medical settings, where Dorian frequently does his musical therapy work, a patient is surrounded by various electronic devices that can create background noise that in that roughly B flat range. He uses musical improvisation grounded in B flat to recontextualize that background noise, turning a stressor into something more familiar and potentially a source of comfort. The first 3 and last 3 verses of this are used in this movement are in that grounded B flat. Second section of the piece, using verse 16, is in a musically distant tritone away from B flat, starting on an E half diminished 7. The progression works its way back around to B flat. It leaves the broad 3 of the hymn setting for a faster syncopated rhythm inspired by hip hop text setting. Transition back to the bridge back into the hymn setting has, to my ear, the most musically distinct aspect of this movement. The piano starts improvising broadly in B flat while the singer sustains an overtone pitch. There isn't time for a full dive into overtone singing, but for those unfamiliar, it's a style of singing which tones higher than the fundamental pitch are emphasized and discernible to the listener. Every tone we hear has associated overtones, but mostly we hear the fundamental. Yeah? I'll attempt to demonstrate. So, classic in Western classical singing, you hear something like, hey, right? Overtone singing, hey. Dorian explained his use of overtones as relating to the esoteric, supernatural nature of sound and inspiration in this text. Second movement, Osawatomie Brown. Osawatomie Brown is the title of a poem by John Greenleaf Whittier, written around the time of Brown's execution. Dorian described this as perhaps the most traditional form of art song to be found in the entire piece, in that it takes a pre-existing poem and sets it to music. The first two verses are drawn from Whittier's Brown of Osawatomie, published following Brown's death, first in the New York Independent, and then reprinted in Garrison's Liberator. Many such poems and accounts of Brown's life were published in the aftermath of the trial and execution. One literary scholar argues that this body of poetry, quote, broke a public sphere taboo against multiracial and violent resistance against slavery. Many of the abolitionist activists were also religious pacifists, and there was always a tension between those who advocated for the immediate violent overthrow, by any means necessary, of the slave system, and those who longed for a peaceful solution. The public poetry of Brown's life and death served to provide voice to the more militant among the abolitionist movement, priming the country for the violence to come in the ensuing war. The musical style of the two Whittier verses is a blues song, in the Delta and Piedmont blues style. Dorian was seeking musical inspiration from the music of Virginia, both of Brown's time and of modern times. The repeated verses, the first two, are common in blues style, while the third movement takes inspiration from a modern Virginian hip-hop duo called Clips. The piano accompaniment, when it comes in, is a guitar strumming pattern. One peek behind the curtain into the collaborative process. Originally, the accompaniment started with piano doubling melody, as a blues guitar would do, traditionally. And we kept working with it, and we found it just didn't have the right effect. It sounded like he was just flunking the notes for me because I couldn't figure out where it was. So it was at the dress rehearsal that it took this final form that you'll hear today. The third movement, Isaac Smith. Isaac Smith was the name under which John Brown rented the farm property near Harper's Ferry. It starts with an excerpt from the telegraph message sent regarding the raid at Harper's Ferry, which then made it into a newspaper headline. Dorian wrote the rest of the text, drawing comparison between the crime of slavery perpetrated for 400 years in the Americas to genocides across history. In particular, the complicity of citizenry in these, citizenry of the perpetrators and the everyday people. The citizens in the telegram most likely refers to plantation owners. What follows is a list of genocidal acts, victims of genocide, and sites of genocidal violence too numerous to detail in one lecture. But I wanted to draw attention to two terms that Dorian picked out as being of special significance: maangamizi and mafa. Maangamizi is a Swahili word referring to the African Holocaust of chattel, colonial, and neo-colonial enslavement. The root word of it denotes intentional destruction. Mafa is a broader term, also Swahili, meaning disaster, that is frequently used to describe the same historical process. Some scholars prefer the term angamizi for its greater specificity. It's preferred by some reparations scholars to discuss what had been previously just called the transatlantic slave trade. International legal scholar Katarina Schwartz says that the term better captures the international framework of violence that made up the global system of imperial domination of Africans and people of African descent that enabled the existence of the transatlantic slave trade. Dorian described the melodic content of the verses of this movement as if Biggie Smalls was doing a verse over Igor Stravinsky or Kurt Weill. Of course, we got all three of them here. The wordplay and rhyme scheme recall Christopher Wallace, aka Notorious B.I.G., aka Biggie Smalls, use of words in his lyrics, particularly in their alliteration and attention to the musicality of the words. Meanwhile, harmonically, there's a bitonality happening with a E flat major chord and a D minor chord sounding simultaneously. The fourth movement, Nelson Hawkins. Nelson Hawkins was a pseudonym used by Brown in some of his correspondence of 1857 and 1858. He maintained a prolific correspondence throughout his life, and many of his letters remain in historical record. The first two verses are imagined letters from Brown to several historical fighters against slavery. The first is to Nat Turner, who led a rebellion in 1831 in Virginia. The violent uprising caused much backlash against slaveholding states, among slaveholding states, and an increased vigilance against further uprisings. The second verse is addressed to the two main figures of the Haitian Revolution, Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Toussaint Louverture. The two men are considered the fathers of Haiti. It was under their leadership, first Louverture and then Dessalines, that the colony of Saint-Domingue, as Haiti was then known, threw off French colonial rule and became the first country in the Americas to eliminate slavery. Now, the music, the melodic content of this is a country western ballad. Why? Well, Dorian asked me what when we were initially discussing it, he asked me what I'd been listening to or what kind of music I liked that I never got a chance to sing. I've been listening to a lot more rock. Did you hear this album before I sent it to you?
I had heard it, but that's like a particle of sand and the beach. So yes, but not deep listening until this project. So
the third section of this movement consists of John Brown's last written words. This is the actual note. Brown passed this to one of the guards as he was being led to the gallows. I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away, but with blood. I had, as I now think vainly, flattered myself that without much bloodshed it might be done. Dorian gave these words a more straightforward, dramatic setting appropriate to their prophetic nature and dire warning. They were perhaps consciously modeled on the warnings of Old Testament prophets. The third movement may sound familiar to some of the audience. It's Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht's Surabaya Johnny with new lyrics. I'll discuss the lyrics first. He wrote 3 verses with a recurring pre-chorus and chorus. It was Dorian who wrote original lyrics for this. The imagined narrator for the first verse is Silas Sewell, who as a young man was a conductor of the Underground Railroad, later attempted to free John Brown and his accomplices from jail while they were awaiting execution, and later served in the Union Army. He gained notoriety for refusing orders to massacre Arapaho and Cheyenne Native Americans while serving in the Colorado Infantry. The young soldier serves as a self-insertion for Dorian, giving him a more direct voice in the piece. Sewell's perspective turns to a wider evaluation of the political economy of the United States and into a direct call to action and inspiration today. The choice of melody was informed by Dorian's association with Sing and Solidera, the DSA choir. The group has a particular affinity for cabaret music of the Weimar Germany era, it's specifically anti-fascist traditions. Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht were 2 of the major figures of that era. As a composer and lyricist team, they collaborated on the 3-penny opera, Happy End, which is the source of Surabaya Johnny, and The Rise and Fall of the City of Mahagani, among other works. Both fled Germany in 1933. In writing new lyrics to an existing melody, Dorian was drawing on several traditions. There's a long history in socialist music to adapt songs for political messaging. One example is to be found in the International Workers of the World, or IWW, whose Little Red Songbook includes new lyrics for many old hymns. Sarah, hold it up. These songs could sometimes be sung over the Salvation Army bands that were sent to drown out IWW street meetings and protests. Instead of being overpowered by the band, the wobbly protesters would turn them into their own backup band. An album of these songs was recorded by Singing Solidarity some years ago in a fantastic collaboration with conductor Christopher Weston. I also see parallels between this piece and Frederick Shevsky's 1975 composition, The People United Will Never Be Defeated, a theme and variations on the Chilean song El Pueblo Unido Jamás Será Vencido by Sergio Ortega and Filipino. Shevsky's composition, in addition to the primary material of the song, quotes traditional Italian socialist song Bandiera Rossa and the Brecht and Hans Eisler song Solidaritätslied, or Solidarity Song. Incidentally, all three of those songs are in Singing Solidarity's repertoire. Now, Dorian has stressed that he does not consider this piece to be this composition to be a narrative piece. But he and I, him more than me, both wear our politics on our sleeves and see ourselves as working within the movement. I wanted to add a piece of overtly political music to a repertoire that I found largely apolitical. The opera and classical music worlds don't tend to involve themselves in radical politics, dependent as they generally are on rich donors and the life of their survival. Dorian uses the third movement and the last verse of the last movement to draw away from John Brown and towards the larger world and emancipatory struggles of today. He uses the labels tyrants and fascists, drawing parallels between the enslavers of Brown's day and all those who divide people against themselves for the purpose of holding on to their own power. Whether the division is by race, religion, national origin, we see to this day powerful people drawing lines between the peoples of the world to divide and conquer. John Brown challenged those divisions in his time, and I hope that in our ways we can too. As the song tells us, John Brown's body lies moldering in the grave, but his soul is marching on. Control and indulge me for about 5 minutes or so, just to take a little pause. We'll start at 51, 52. I feel like I'm releasing one of my classes. Again. Vengeance belongeth
which frameth mischief by a law. But the Lord is my defense, and my God is the rock of my refuge. And he shall bring upon them their own iniquity, and shall cut them off in their own wickedness. Yea, the Lord our God shall cut them off. John Brown of Osawatomie spake on his dying day, I will not have to shrive my soul a priest in slavery's pay, but let some poor black mother whom I have striven to free, with her children from the gallows stair, put up a prayer for me. Put up a prayer for me. John Brown of Osawatomie, they led him out to die. And lo, a poor black mother with her little child drew nigh. Then the bolt blew, I grew tender, and the wood much fainter as he stood between the jeering ranks and kissed the black child. Ride or die for the weary souls, and we will hold blood in the eyes of the spirit that dragged towards the goal. Kick down the gates, break all the chains, and if one dies for the people, then they die for the movement. Trains fired into and stopped, several persons killed, telegraph wires cut, contributions levied on the citizens. The citizens, the citizens, the citizens, the citizens, the citizens, always the citizens. Citizens playing dress up in victims' clothes, but their heads lashed the whips and strips at the stage in Gaza and Darfur. From Virginia to Rwanda, Moriori's the Holocaust. A genocide is a genocide is a genocide. A genocide is a genocide is a genocide. A genocide is a genocide is a genocide. Citizens playing dress up on stolen lands, but their hands lash the stick-shaped strips at the stage in Western Sahara. Armenia, Cambodia, the Yazidi, Guatemala. A genocide is a genocide life, Johnny, now they want revenge. The foes you've killed, Johnny, make these greedy men ghosts, Johnny. God damn the rope they've got around your fucking neck. Harper's Ferry, Johnny, do you feel prepared? Harper's Ferry, Johnny, the enslavers are scared. Harper's Ferry, Johnny, your humanity lies bare. Expose the truth, Johnny. Actions are louder than prayers. Oh, the presidents owned enslaved black people, and the judges were enslavers too. Congress members were rich from free black labor, and the generals were enslavers too. Wall Street was built by enslaved black people, and the bankers were enslavers too. This entire nation state built by free labor, of black, brown, and indigenous too. You went and fought, Johnny, and now you'll die, Johnny. You've given your life, Johnny, now they want revenge. The foes you've killed, Johnny, make these greedy men ghosts, Johnny. God damn the rope they've got around your fucking neck. Harper's Ferry, Johnny, do you feel prepared? Harper's Ferry, Johnny, the enslavers are scared. Harper's Ferry, Johnny, your humanity lies bare. Expose the truth, Johnny. Actions are louder than prayers. Oh, the tyrants they thought they could bury what you stood for with smears and with lies. Oh, the hatred these tyrants' bodies carry, every moment they dehumanize. But the wounds of this struggle remain open, and the fascists are still out there today. We won't stop until every chain is broken. We won't stop until every tyrant pays. You went and fought, Johnny, and now you'll die, Johnny. You've given your life, Johnny, now they want revenge. The foes you've killed, Johnny, make these greedy men ghosts, Johnny. God damn the rope they have around your fucking neck. Harper's Ferry, Johnny, do you feel prepared? Harper's Ferry, Johnny, the enslavers
tune, don't worry, half the room does at least. So just sing along.
For this very reason.